Hello, welcome to the channel. I'm speaking with Dr. Tekle Woldemikael, who was a professor of sociology and international studies at Chapman University and now a research associate at Sciences Po at the University of Bordeaux. He has researched in the United States, the Caribbean, Sudan, Ethiopia, and Eritrea. His various research projects include studying patterns of Haitian immigrants, Ethiopian and Eritrean refugees in the United States, South Sudanese migrants in northern Sudanese towns, and the role of ethnicity in nationalist movements and nation building in the Horn of Africa. He previously taught for 2 years at the University of Garissa in Sudan and various colleges in the US, including the University of Redlands, Whittier College, Hamilton College, and the University of Hartford. He specializes in urban sociology, bridging theory and methods, social theory, race, ethnicity, nationalism, and ethnographic methods. His most recent research focuses on immigration and refugees in the United States and nation-building efforts in Eritrea and the Horn of Africa. And his publications include Belonging, Maintenance, Change, and Status Within the Haitian Community, Post-Liberation Eritrea, and Scholars and Southern Californians in Dialogue, New Conversations in Public Sociology. I'm pleased to have Dr. Woldemikael on the channel. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, George.
Thank you. When researchers study migration patterns in the Horn of Africa, what information is required to understand the motivation of people to flee? Is it the domestic situation for refugees and migrants which causes a push, or the opportunities in Western democracies that's causing a pull?
In particular, in the Horn of Africa, are you speaking about, or migration in general?
I'm speaking in general of the situation of refugees, but we can also focus on the Horn of Africa.
Well, refugee is a political term, and it is about people leaving their own home because it's unsafe to be at home, and they go to another place for safety. They are a form of homeless people. They don't have a home, so they leave their home and they haven't arrived where they want to be, and so they are somewhere in between, and somebody takes care of them, maybe UNHCR or the host country where they go, and they put them on refugee camps. And so by definition, from that on, they become refugees. They're just normal people who cannot tolerate the place where they were born, where they are citizens, and they're not treated well. They're not treated with respect. They are harassed by authorities. So it's a political designation to be called refugee. Refugee are in search of a place where they can feel stable, where they can feel accepted, where they can create their own families, their own stability. And because they found where they originated from is unstable, unable to sustain their lives, they cannot meet their opportunities. So there are people who confuse refugee with migration. Migration is a different issue. Migration is a person moves from one place to another, seeking for a better opportunity. A lot of immigrants come to the United States seeking opportunity, and they don't tell you, I came because my government is oppressive. There may be many other reasons, but they come searching for opportunity. So it's different. We need to be clear on that, between the difference between refugees and the immigrants, or migrants even.
Are there push factors which are causing people to flee their home countries, or are there pull factors which attract people? And do the governments of these countries use that as a way to misinform others about the situation in their country?
Well, push and pull theory is an old theory of migration. The two go together, push and pull. When you are finding your home country unacceptable and there are places that are safer elsewhere, they're both happening. One is pulling you, one is pushing you out. So they're dialectical and not one or the other. They go together, push and pull factors. Economic and political factors also go together. The economy might be so bad, the political situation might be so bad that you are pushed by both political and economic forces. You leave your own home and seek for a better place where you can search for opportunity, for safety, for your personal safety. But the reason I said about refugees is they are not safe. Physical safety, emotional safety, other forms of safeties are taken away from them. So it's more about their humanity is being violated. That's why they become refugees, compared to migration, where you might be okay, but you're seeking for better opportunities. When I studied Haitians, most of them were coming because of seeking for better opportunities. That's what they tell you. That was migration, you know. The Eritrean case and people in the Horn, the Somalis, they really are being pushed by a place which they call home that made it impossible for them to just breathe fresh air, to feel at home, to be young when they're young, to have hope. If you take away hope from people, and their hope is being smashed every day, in this case, in the Eritrean case, by the state, and the state itself is competing with the young people in claiming the opportunities. The opportunities are not open to them, but it wants to tell them, stay within me. I will create opportunities maybe sometime, but I need you now to serve in national service. I need you now to sacrifice. I need you now to be part of the fighting forces. That is not giving liberty. I'm very much into liberty. Liberty is essential for any human being to breathe and survive. Liberty means you are free as an individual. Freedom of choice, freedom of an individual is not a minor issue. I know there are many people in my society, in our society, who doesn't consider that individual rights is a good way of looking at things. I think that's a fundamental issue. Nothing is fundamental than individual rights. Upon the fundamental right of individual, you can build all other rights, including collective rights. But the collective rights should not violate the individual rights. So central to any thought that you start with individual and how they have been treated as humans with dignity, with inner dignity that was given to them by the fact that they're human beings. Like all people around the world, there's nothing unique about Eritreans. They are human beings as well. So are Ethiopians, so are Tigray, so are Somalis. So if we start respecting them, that's why also we need to talk to other people outside our own bubbles in Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, because the world knows that. Many societies have solved these kinds of issues through working through individuals and then constructing their own societies, which are egalitarian, which are for equity, which are for opportunity and for prosperity. You know, you can build it. There's no either or. It's such a false dichotomy people create. Oh no, we're for collective, individual is secondary. No, equally as important as a collective is the individual. They both go together. I'm both I and I'm part of we.
Why do you think people are reluctant to speak about these things, though, to others who may not be aware of the situation? Is it because of the fear of being rejected by society or being labeled as an outcast? Why is it that Eritreans may not feel comfortable speaking about the issues with others who understand the circumstance of what the circumstances that you explained to me now?
I'm a sociologist by training, so I think of these things in terms of sociological. And by that, what I mean is, you know, in America, you know, when you follow the rules of the society, you're conformist to society and you're a conformist society, you know, you're conforming. And if you don't follow the rules, people call them deviant, different, outsider, minority, you know, all that. And we know those things and they are very important. We need to treat people with respect when they are different than we are. There's something in our society that has not been addressed very carefully because our society really tolerates differences in terms of cultural differences of a lot of things. Political deviance. political differences is severely punished. To be politically different is not tolerated. It's not part of the culture. It has never been part of the culture. So to be outside of the political framework that has been accepted, you are supposed to obey. You are supposed to accept. This starts with the family. You know, the father is the boss of the family. The mom is secondary, and the women are always secondary. The father eats first. He eats the best. He runs the household, and the children are the third and the last. The female the girls are least, the boys are higher, but within the families there is always a hierarchy, and it's really nobody has a speech, nobody listens anyone carefully where the father punishes, uses physical punishment. Usually in our culture, insults are used, physical corporal punishment is used, and the government also acts the same way. The community also has the same way. The church has the same, and I'm sure I cannot speak for Islam, but it might be the same as well. So here we are, a society that doesn't allow for individuals to be free. And we know that the secret of in the Western creativity is the individual is given a lot of leeway to be creative and different. And if we can get into that mindset, I think we will find a lot of people expressing themselves in so many ways, as artists, as philosophers, as scientists, as sociologists, as a mathematician. But when you say there's only one way, my way, and the ruler is the one who knows, the father is the one who knows, the high priest is the one who knows, the sheikh is the one who knows best. You got a hierarchical system that doesn't allow for diversity of thought to blossom. And you don't know where new ideas come from. New ideas may come from the least expected, the most abused, the most looked down person. And creativity always, we will be surprised how many people, how many bright people are the people you don't think they have anything going on with them, and then they surprise you with wonders they can do. So I think that's the individual, where you respect them, then they shine, and then they will become like beautiful flowers. But if you really squash it before it even grow, then we are not going to get the chance we have to be creative society. So I am really always saying we don't have a way of addressing issues that when you are different in your political thought, when you're different in your way of thinking about things, how they should be, there's a severe punishment from our society and banishment. The Orthodox, I'm Christian Orthodox, they used to punish people. They excommunicate you. The Eritrean politics is full of excommunication by the church for people who had political differences with the mainstream. And they got kicked out. Some of them were denied burials in their own church. Now the government, as well, it's like a sacred organization because it controls the church and everything. It refuses people from being buried in their home countries if they die. So that is as fundamental as anything else. This is foundational. I think people don't really think about this, but a state denying people from burying in their home country, it's unthinkable. A state that claims to speak for the people, then where are the people? Who are the people? Who does the state speaks about as the people? Awat nahafash. That means people. Translation, people, masses. I don't like the word masses because it comes from the left movement. I was part of the left movement. I understand the Marxist-Leninist language, but the masses doesn't capture peoplehood, sense of hizbi, integria. Then you can see the person in that. Masses kind of hide individuals. When you talk about masses, you're talking about huge people, and the person disappears. Therefore, it's collective. But when you say person, persons, people, then you can see we're talking about multitude of individuals. Each one of them, like beautiful flowers, they can shine. I know, you know, everybody knows a lot of great people were born in that land called Eritrea. My peers, I'm not the best from my peers. I cannot claim that I saw so many beautiful flowers. They're all now underground, buried, dead. As our government, our people call them martyred. And I don't want to talk about martyrdom. It's not a beautiful thing to talk about, because what we're talking about is a euphemism for dead people. They're dead, they're gone. So all those people who had great potential never realized, a lot of them, my age group, died at the age of 20, 25. Not many of them reached the age of 30. Cut short because they were told they were fighting for a nation to liberate. Liberate! Think about it. Liberate is fundamentally individual rights at its core. It comes from the French liberation idea of liberal, liberty, equality, fraternity. Liberty is individualizing. Individual has to be respected. Equality is equalizing. Everybody has to be treated. That's the collective. And fraternity is community, or, unity of the community. The community should be respected. So those three fundamental foundations are the three foundations of every revolution that has happened. Eritrea is not different. It's used the term liberation movement without understanding that liberation meant individuals have rights. They use the word masses without understanding that it means individuals, collective individuals, and each one of them should be feeling okay with the system, or to be able to be different and be accepted at the same time. If you can't crack that down, then we're talking about, I don't know what we're talking about, things, humans as things, as masses. Then you're just really in a different world. Father knows best, the state knows best, the party knows best. All that is top down, and we know the consequences. Massive human abuse of humans, massive abuse of young people, the older generation treating the young people as they are usable. National service, as in the Eritrea, we call it Sawa. And they can be used for war. Right now in Ethiopia, they were sent, a lot of them. They can be used for building roads. They're building dams. They are not paid. They're not respected. They're not human beings. They're not being seen. They're not being treated as an individual. Did they ask them, what do you want to do? Do you know in America, every child is asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I like to ask that question to all the Eritrean kids as well. And a lot of American kids tell you, I want to be the president. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a scientist. I want to be the best person I can be, a preacher, and this and that. So these are things that people dream of, and they live, and when you give them that chance, they become it, what they want to be. That question is not being asked to young people in Eritrea. And they are leaving because they want to go to places where, if not them, their children can get that chance. It could be, that's why it's not surprising that they choose Western societies, US, Australia, Canada, and Europe, because those are the places that say to their children when they're young, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the little Obama became the president of the United States. He can dream big. My own daughters, they're growing and they're doing very well. And they are dreaming big. And America allows them. I cannot imagine what they would have been if they were in Eritrea. Can't. And so the stimulation for migration from Eritrea to the United States could be partly because people like me who have given space to our children. And those in Eritrea, when they hear that, when they see that, they say, am I not equal to that person as well? My nephew, my cousin, who's in the States can become this and this, and I don't have that. They are willing to eat it up and stay, but nobody is paying attention to them. Nobody is even giving them the question and telling them, what I want you to become this. Sometimes I mean Eritrean families are very strong. They want you to become an engineer or a doctor. Or, that's not unusual in the third world context. So I may be going too far on that option, but I just want to emphasize that when you say Eritrean Liberation Front, Eritrean Liberation Movement, Eritrean People's Liberation Front, get back to the idea of liberation. It has fundamental meaning and nobody stays there. We need to stay on that topic, liberation. And the question we have to ask is, have our people been liberated? What do we mean by liberation if we say
Right.
they're liberated?
Well, I want to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, which is the institutional power of the groups in the country, which are seen as, for many years, the authoritative or the final say, so to speak. You talk about the church. Do you think that the government recognizes the value or the power that these institutions bring onto people's lives? And do they manipulate it in such a way where it can benefit them? We saw earlier this year, the Eritrean Orthodox Church replaced the patriarch for the third time at the whim of the government's request. Does the government recognize the power of institutions to influence the population?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We know that throughout our history, the church and the mosque are influential because people pray to their creator by going to the mosque or by going to church. Our people are highly religious, extremely religious. They're pious. They pray, they fast, they go to church, they go to the mosque. Every family has a lot of connection to his church. So if you want to reach the people, if you want to become legitimate in any society in the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Sudan, Somalia, you got to get the church or the mosques by your side. You cannot be outside of it because they have to legitimize you in the eyes of the people, which means in the eyes of God. To do that, you got to have an in into the church. And what the Eritrean government has done is it really targeted the Orthodox Church and co-opted it and chose its pope, its leaders. It penetrated every angle conceivable, the financial and the appointments and this and that, and they split the Orthodox church into two. Those who are pro-government, those who are against the government. What it means is it succeeded in divide and rule. It did the same thing with the Muslim community. It's because it wants to stay power. It wants to stay power, therefore you divide the people into 2-3 groups, and then you can manipulate them by getting them close. When one is close to you, one is far. The one that's far wants to get close, and then the struggle continues, and you are sitting comfortably running the system because you're balancing all these forces. First of all, Islam and Christianity has served a lot of important role for the Eritrean movement and government and movements. They balance the two. They have their favorites within the Islamic community. They have their favorites within the Christian communities, and they play them out. And the religion divide itself also serves them because it is divide and rule as well. It has served the British very well when they were in Eritrea. It has served Ethiopia very well, and it is serving the PFDJ as well very well. They know that they are sitting in between Christian and Muslims, and they can manipulate back and forth into it. So the morality of the society is under the hegemony of the ruling party, and the ruling party needs the morality under its control because the religious communities are also the source of moral, the source of what's right and wrong, and what's important in afterlife. And so when you get if the church is outside of the control of the state feels threatened. And so the state of Eritrea has controlled the church, its finances, its movements, its leaders. It's purely either it's subjugated, if you want, or it is co-opted, whichever we want it. So the same in Ethiopia, it goes on and on, but there are some levels of freedom in Ethiopia than in Eritrea. Sudan is completely like Eritrea. The church, the mosque works closely with the government. Until very recently, the government was run by the high priestess in Sudan. So we're talking about highly religious societies, religion playing a significant role in shaping the morality of the society, and then the state very actively recruiting the leaders and the institution and bringing the whole society under its control. So in the process, liberty is forgotten, okay? In the process, the people are forgotten. The people meaning the individuals within the society. What is important is maintaining power and the state power especially. So how you do that is ideological. You can manipulate the ideology of society. You maintain what's right and wrong. So political defense, you remember I said political deviance is not allowed. So you are controlling what is right and wrong. You can very easily disqualify a person into political deviance. What I'm talking about political deviance is if I have a different opinion, they say, who is he? What is his origin? Which region does he come from? Which tribe, which family, which ethnicity? Is he really Eritrean? Is he, quote unquote, Wayane? All that comes to play because you're creating a deviant person by doing that outside of the norm, outside of the political imagination known as Eritrea, outside of the imagined community by making them outsiders. Very easily discredited them.
Well, one of the other mainstays in Eritrean society, which I think the government has utilized very well, is the national military service. With respect to societal transformation, since the border war ended in 2000, it's been accused of a series of human rights violations and denials of freedom. The Commission of Inquiry investigating Eritrea in 2015 stated that the conditions that conscripted Eritreans face equal to crimes against humanity, including the enslavement, imprisonment, torture, rape, murder, and other inhumane actions against the Eritrean civilian population. Speaking from the diaspora perspective, how does this affect the population and their perception of how society has transformed since Eritrea became independent?
How it affects the local population?
The diaspora, like when people look into the country, what do they see?
Boy, the diaspora is a problem. The diaspora is so divided. Let me put it this way. When you're diaspora, it means you are displaced from your own home, where you think you should be. The Israelis were diaspora for so many years, which means they were displaced from the promised land called Israel, right? So when you're displaced, when you define yourself as diaspora, it means you want to go home. You want to have a good relationship with your homeland where your parents, your grandparents have been buried, where you were born. You have a right to live and be part of the society without feeling alien, without feeling foreigner, without feeling immigrant, without feeling refugee. That's why the idea of diaspora is so powerful, because people are being pulled. I can visualize that they belong. There's some place called home, the promised land. So a lot of people who are diaspora want to have a good relationship with that promised land. How you do it is very difficult, because there's a state there that has become a gatekeeper of how you enter to Eritrea, how to enter to your village, how you get buried, how you get to meet your family members with whom you want to identify and be part of them. So many people have found different ways. First of all, the government has created fake organizations called women's organization, youth organization, this organization. If you belong to them, you can get in and be on good terms with them. Another is you pay 2%. That's you getting in. It's not fully, there are so many other obstacles. The other is keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything, because I don't want to go there. You can ask me about the spying. The spying is going on all the time, and I'll talk about that if you ask me the question, but I'll stay on the topic of So they want to be in good terms, and they are afraid of other Eritreans who may report them to the government, because there are so many people who are afraid of their relationship to their home country, where they are diaspora from, and they want to go back to Eritrea, and they don't want to be seen negatively by the ruling class in Eritrea, by the party in Eritrea, by the ruling families in Eritrea, by the ruling groups in Eritrea, whoever thinks that they can judge a person when they are outside, whether they are being politically deviant or not. So when they do that, if there's a bad word about you, you may be banned, you may be not able to get in. And this is really the key. Even if they cannot stop you, you start to have fear that when I enter, they may arrest me, because the uncertainty works to their advantage. You fear, so you self-censor, you stay outside. There are many people, there's no reason why they cannot go, but they're afraid, because fear itself becomes an instrument for control. And so even though they may not be as powerful as we think they are, the fear itself controls you. So you are yourself self-centering, self-controlling, and also avoiding going back. And therefore you behave. You want to do the best you can to be in good terms. Those who have a key, I call them gatekeepers. They have really a key, whether to let you on or not. When you enter in Eritrea, in the airport, there's a black book, and there's somebody on that corner checking everybody going in, if there's any person in the black book or red book, I don't know, I think it's black book. And so they will arrest you. They'll take shish you and then never be heard about. And the terror that creates, the uncertainty is really the instrument of the ruling party in Eritrea. The uncertainty, because there are no rules, there are no constitution, there's no courts, there's no accusation formally. They just shish you out, and then you're gone, and nobody heard. And then they said, we don't know. It's just two people took him away. In what? In a small car. What happened? They say he's arrested. Oh, and then our society is not allowing people as individuals. That's where the culture comes in. That's why I said political defense is not allowed. Instead of saying, they side always with the ruling people, because they say, he must have done something wrong. They don't ask, I know George. George is a good man. I'll stand for him. I'm his witness. I know him from childhood. He's innocent until you prove him guilty. They don't say that. What they say is, oh, they must have found something wrong with him. They go along with the general concept. That's where the individual disappears in our society. That's when we need to speak up. I don't even know why we claim we are Christians. In Christianity, there's a lot, not that I practice very openly, practice regularly, but there's something I like about witnessing for people. You witness for them the truth. If you know them so well, we don't even practice that. They don't witness for a person saying, I know him, he's good. Couldn't be him. Instead, you must have done something wrong, because they know better. How do they know better than your friend, your family, your community? Who should be witnessing for you? That's why we have courts to witness for you. That's why you have rule of law to witness for you. That's why we have constitution, so that people can come and present evidence. But when you deny them, and the decider is one person, one party, a group of people, we don't know how they work. They're a group, they're sometimes one, they're sometimes multiple. We don't even know how they operate. Secretly, it has been decided, nobody knows. And you ask one person, they don't seem to communicate with one another. They don't even trust one another. There are women who has husband there are ministers whose husbands are in prison. Women ministers whose husbands are in prison. Think about it. And they say nothing in public. There are half a person is in prison, half of the person's partner is in prison, the person is serving the institution, and there's no even due process. Couldn't they ask, bring my partner to a due process so that we know what he did wrong, what she did wrong? Family members are put in prison with no due process. Due process is not alien to our society. This is new. This came with the front. So the front uses language, culture, society, norms to its own advantage, but it's not continuation of our norms, our values. So because we have pretty strong society of legalistic system. Many people will tell you tradition has a legal system. Everything is done in a systematic way. Weddings are done in a systematic way. Engagements are done in the systematic way. Divorce is done in the systematic way. Nothing is random or arbitrary. But the system we have now is very arbitrary, decides. And so if you're a young person, 18, 16, in Eritrea, are you migrating because of push or pull factor? Are you leaving the country when the decider, you don't even know what the decider has in his hands about you? The insecurity you feel, the uncertainty for yourself, for your family members, for your parents, at some point, you're just gonna say, I can't do this. Others are fleeing. Some of my relatives are living well in diaspora. I wanna leave. Nobody wants to leave home. I've never, in my study of migration, found evidence to say that people just pick up and leave. Never. There's always a reason. There's always a reason. The reason is local. It's there. And so, and they're pushed out. Pushed out. If you push between push and pull, they're pushed out. And then not only they are pushed out, there are always stations from which they can go. You go from this, it's known, it has been institutionalized over years. So you go this way, you go towards Kassala, you go to Sudan border, you go to Ethiopian border. There are people like this, you hear all kinds of reports, and you cross this way, and then you're going to be here, and then you go to Addis Ababa, then you go to maybe through Latin America, then you enter to the United States through Mexico, or you hear through Mediterranean, and then all this is public knowledge before you migrate, before you leave, before you become refugee. Because there's a general system that has been established for so long, because the system at home is so rotten, so weak, so unproductive, so unpredictable, so deciding on your life without your consent, violating your liberty, your individual right. That's so core. That's why liberty, we need to understand it and go into it deeper and deeper. What are the liberal thoughts, the origin of liberal thoughts? We need to understand that. And it's a Western concept. So we throw it around and we don't even ask, where did this idea of liberty come from? It's a Western concept. It has a long history. It has served them very well. We thought it would serve us, but we didn't even digest it. We didn't even debate it. We didn't even read about it. We don't even know the origin of it. It was just like our own, you know? So we throw it around. We throw around this kind of democracy is another one abused in our region. What is democracy? Are they talking, do they know that the Greeks were the first to come up with the idea of democracy, popular vote, individual rights? We have a long history of connecting with the Greeks all the way to the Aksumites. Why didn't we learn from the Greeks something, some elements of democracy? If we're really on the same level as the Greeks. It never crossed the Red Sea as far as I can see, but there were some elements of democracy in villages in Eritrea called Desa, and people deciding under a fig tree, you know, Daro, and then they discuss. There was some form, but I don't know if that was connected to the Western concept of democracy, but even of our own is good if we can respect an individual. The core value is just individual is respected and should be really thought of as having inner dignity. It's about dignity, nothing more.
Well, I'd like to ask about the role of spying. You mentioned it a little briefly. Maybe this question is tangential to that. From the testimonies of Eritreans who choose to be anonymous for fear of reprisals, what are the negative consequences that arise from being in a society that is denigrated due to the heavy militarization?
This is where how it has been very hard to overthrow or change the system in Eritrea. There are two ways they have controlled the system. One is, it so happens, I was here in the United States at that time, 70s. Student movement were active, supporting the movement. Very, very good groups. And they established a support group. They used to call themselves Eritrean Students for AFLNA, which is Eritrean Students for Liberation in North America. They wrote pieces and stuff. And so that morphed, and elsewhere, and then in 1977, they had a fight with the front, and then the front changed them into mass movements, mass organizations that support the movement without having independence. But the movement here in the North America was independent, was really powerful and good organization. And so since then, they have created what they call mass organizations using the leftist language. You create mass organization, which means they support you and you run everything. And all the decisions being made in the field. So it started that way, and now all these mass organizations, they call them Hafash Dubat, became instruments for control of diaspora Eritreans. They just became just instruments. How much loyal you are, what are you trusted? That's one. The second is martyrdom. That's a big topic. It's so rare any movement has sacrificed so much for so little as Eritrea. The tangible things that came out of Eritrean struggle are very, very few. So many movements, so much suffering has generated philosophers, artists, writers, thinkers, new ways of doing things. What has come out of Eritrea's 30 years of struggle, of blood, of sacrifice? Nothing. Nothing to show for it. But martyrdom is not about producing geniuses from that and creativity and stuff. Martyrdom is because somebody who you loved, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle, some of you, your fathers, whatever, maybe your grandfathers to some of you, died in a war. It's a war. And they died, and too many of them died. There are families that lost 5 people, 6 people, 3 people. There's none that I know in Eritrea that didn't lose 1 person at least. And so the movement that came said, we are the continuity of your brothers and sisters who died. We came Hedri, which means their promise. We are the bearers of the, I call them, they have, what do you call them? Gatekeepers now. They became gatekeepers, but when they came, they were Hedri. They were bearing the promise of liberty, the promise of prosperity, the promise of equality. And so they died for a cause. You know, when somebody dies, you don't want a senseless death. So we found martyrdom a way of dealing with this uncertainty, what happened to our friends and brothers and sisters. They died for a cause, they sacrificed. And the keepers of that promise came to Eritrea in 1991. That's what we hoped, that's what we imagined. The keepers of that promise use that to their advantage without maintaining the promise. The promise of liberty, equality, democracy, constitution. I'm not making this up. Look at EPLF's and ELF's programs in 1977, 1987, the Charter of EPLF 1994. All that is full of democracy and liberty and beautiful language. They promise. And all those charters are important. All those programs are important because they are the only concrete way in written form what they promise to deliver. And none of that has been achieved. So how they manipulate the two are martyrdom and also spying, because the mass movements, the people who were outside from being independent were transformed around 1977, 78 into mass movements. And since then, they never trusted any independent organization outside of their control that's living in abroad and be cooperating with them. It has to be in their own terms as mass movement. Now they're turned into spying agencies. So Eritrea doesn't operate in any normal way, in a diplomatic way, like all governments in the world. all its government, all its embassies are spying networks for it to spy on Eritreans because they have lost their mission of liberty, fraternity, equality, democracy, all those lofty ideas which they enshrined in their national programs, in their charter, are completely pushed out as though they're irrelevant. And connecting to the international community and making Eritrea blossom and show what great nation of 30 years sacrifice and even more has to show. Instead, they hide from that. And then the people, whenever now they just managing the people, seeing them, managing them, arresting them. The young are serving national service. That became an end. It's like a pleasure they get out of that sadistic relationship with the younger generation. The young generation is completely demoralized and they're escaping in mass because these people are they seem to be doing that on and on and on. We thought there was a purpose, but it's just really power play. Power play for people who have no other purpose. They lost their cause. Maybe they were great people when they went to the front. Maybe when they were great people when they came even early. But in between, they failed terribly and they never admitted it. They never gave Eritreans democracy. They never gave the people, the masses, voice. They never gave individuals voice. They never opened opportunities. I'm speaking blah, blah, blah. No, I'm speaking from knowledge. I grew up in Asmara. I was there when I grew up in the 50s, 60s when Eritrea was run mostly big factories, industries by the Italians. Prosperity was there. Yes, they were controlling Eritrea, but prosperity was there. Even during the Federation, there was a lot of prosperity in Eritrea. And people were working. They were migrating to Addis Ababa and Ethiopia, and they were prospering. To Sudan, they were prospering. So I'm not talking about fantasy. This regime completely failed Eritreans. And it would never admit that it failed them. Instead, it's creating all kinds of process, fuses to deny its failure, and then it chases the young people as though it has nothing else to do. I think that it has nothing to do except turn the whole society into a prison for young people and those who are descendants of political deviants, as they call them. And so it's just an end in itself. It's like they are not only gatekeepers, but prison, what do you call them? Jail watchers. They are prison guards and maintaining the whole society as a prison, and the diaspora also part of that extension. And that's the end. I don't see any vision in Eritrea now. No vision whatsoever. And going to Ethiopia was another adventure to distract. Destruction. What good can come out of going to a war that the start of the war is not clear. There's so much misinformation. I don't even know what happened, where it happened, how it happened. I don't even want to start discussing the Ethiopian case because there's so much fake news from all sides. I just wish Eritrea just kept itself out of that trouble because it has already done so much war. It doesn't need another war that doesn't concern it. Instead, in a daylight, the leader of Eritrea said, it's our concern, which I see as hiding from his failure. There's no other reason. And then plunge the people. Then he has to chase them. They are going to be running away. And then they went into the refugee camps and they raided them. And then some of them came back to Eritrea. And now the Eritreans are abusing the refugees. All that is destruction. What we want is to get back to Eritrea. It was in 1950s. We had a government, however corrupt it was. We had a parliament, however inefficient it was, but build on that. We're not really far from, it can be done. It was done. Reforming it, reestablishing it, and let the people do what they please to do there because they are really not asking much from the government. They don't expect anything from the government. No retirement, no social security, nothing. Look how the United States takes care of us. We know what a good society is. And I'll tell you, Eritrea doesn't have a good society. Good society meaning the government hasn't built a good society. The society is good by its tradition, beautiful, a lot of beautiful tradition, rich tradition, actually. It's amazing how rich our society is. And the more I read, the more I get impressed. But the new regime that came is supposed to create a new good society and promised to create a good society. And a good society is real. Americans have written so much about what a good society should be. And they try to actualize it all the time. I know it's imperfect union, but it's trying all the time. And Eritrea, there isn't even a first step towards that because that's shoved under. And destruction, war here, war there, interfering here, interfering there, labeling somebody Tigrayan, labeling somebody jihadi, labeling somebody Wayani, labeling somebody anti-government. This has become an end in itself. And I don't think that is an end. I've given up. Tell you the truth. I have given up that anything can reform the regime as it is. I can't see any light at the end of the tunnel. I don't mean that.
In a negative way.
Yeah, I don't mean, yeah, I don't see an end to this because it has gone in the wrong direction. It cannot self-correct, you know? There's a Swedish economist, social scientist by the name Gunnar Myrdal. He used to say that development is like cycles. You go in cycles and you go forward and then you step back twice. You go forward twice, you step back once, and then you go forward once, twice, and then you step back twice, one. So 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, but you're also going in circles. So you don't realize that you're moving forward, you're developing. Devolution also happens in the same way. You think you're going 1 step and then you go 2 steps backwards, 2 steps, then 1 step forward and then 2 steps backward. And then you devolve, but you're going in circles. You don't know that you have hit the bottom. I think that's what Eritrea is. It has been devolving. He calls it a circular cumulative causation. It's a very interesting, beautiful concept. He's a Nobel Prize winner, economist, Gunnar Myrdal. Anybody can read it. And in the Eritrean case, it's really spiraling towards the bottom. And it has done it so much, but you're not aware because you go in circles. You think you're solving it, but you're really going down, 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 down. And so it may not have an end because it's an endless pit. It's an endless abyss. It can go worse. You think things can go worse. It can go worse because there is no vision. There's no thinking alternatively because they got rid of all those politically deviant people because of those people who are individuals, those who want to do new things. They don't tolerate businesses. Business is individuals open businesses because they're enterprising. Enterprising individuals are the source of wealth. They create new things. They are innovators. They're thinkers. They can invent new things. They create market. They create profit. They create jobs. The government competes with them and arrests them, saying they are corrupt. They are rotten. No, it's the government that's rotten that doesn't allow the individual to prosper and make the society prosperous. That's how you create prosperous society. Our people know that. Farmers produce, our farmers know their land better than the government. They know each land in Eritrea, it has its unique characteristics. There's microclimates in Eritrea. The government goes to use tractors, plowing it in one way, another way, and the production is dismal. The farmers know what is good land, when it rains, when it doesn't rain enough, what you plant. There's so much indigenous knowledge that has not been tapped. Our people are peasants, farmers with deep knowledge of the land. Instead, their land was taken away from them. I don't know. I cannot tell you how disappointing this is. I'm not saying this. I don't get any pleasure from this. I come from this because I heard somebody in the interview on the Eritrean website saying, I'm coming from sadness. He was saying, I'm not saying all this because I'm having pleasure on this. It comes from deep sadness and disappointment. I'm just sad. I don't see a way out. I cannot think of outside of this box that they put us in. And to get out of that, I have a solution, actually. In the Tigrinya version, I said, I want the government to keep its hands off people.
It's a distressing topic, and I know we could go on for much more time to talk about this, but I do want to ask a question with respect to the generational divide that you were talking about. When Eritreans fled from Eritrea, which has been the case since the early 1950s and 60s, what comparison can you draw between the revolution generation fighting for independence and the independence generation after the border war and since the PFDJ came to power? What are the particular differences in each that define these two groups?
Well, we are the generation of African liberation. We were jealous of my generation. 1960s, a lot of African countries became independent. They were colonized, and we wanted to have the same opportunity because Eritrea was federated and Ethiopia was not really doing what the federation was about. And so the unity with Ethiopia was not working out very well. And they were in beyond their own ability to manage Eritrea, essentially. Eritrea is a Western implant on the Horn of Africa. It was really an extension of Italian colonial administration. The Ethiopians they're just feudal and very much into relationships and marriage of aristocrats and stuff. They thought they can control Eritrea through that. And they were unable to control it because there has been new ideas that came to Eritreans, and that is the idea of liberty. Especially in the 1950s, 40s, when the British came, there was a lot of political thought that entered into the people that they can be self-determined. There was something called democracy. People like Walda Woldemariam and others were really exploring these deep ideas of Western thought and trying to understand them. And so when the Ethiopians tried to understand Eritrea, they couldn't cope. They couldn't understand it. So that generation was inspired by the African liberation movement, the Third World Liberation Movement, Latin America, Asia, and Africa. And they wanted the same themselves. And they thought they can establish an independent nation for democracy, for liberty, for fraternity, based on national liberation. And so the dream was good. Nation, there's no way you can become prosperous unless you are united under one nation. Eritrea, a former colony, can become a nation and become independent and therefore prosper. And therefore this highly educated Eritreans, and that's how it became entrepreneurial during the Italian rule, that were workers, and there were highly motivated peasants in Eritrea can work together to build a prosperous nation. That was a dream. And that's a beautiful dream. And it's hard to achieve. Many Africans failed in achieving it, but they never did what the Eritrean government did to the second generation, to their own children. That's the difference. Their own children they saw them as, since they were failing, instead of admitting we failed, therefore you guys run it. You're the young generation, we sit back and we retire. They said, no, you got to serve the revolution because the revolution was not achieved. It's because we haven't worked hard. We didn't commit ourselves to the national liberation. You have to sacrifice like we did. I've never thought of any evil intent than that. It's sad. You don't wish your children to be your servants, to serve you. Where did this come from? It's never part of our culture. I mean, I know peasant families when their children have big families and their children serve them. Are we turning into that? I thought we were more modern. We were moving towards what prosperity, modern society was going to do. But to make the children achieve what the fathers and the mothers failed by sacrificing them, sending them to difficult places. I have never seen any place. In Eritrea, people know had a lot of technological advances in the past. They didn't carry things on their back. They had willpower. I saw in the national service, people carrying big blocks in their head. I just said, this is Stone Age. How did they come up with this? Making these young people carry ferrying stones to build this bridge, this road. I mean, we need willpower. We need, we need modern technology to move things. Even that is not done. And so what happened? What happened? Why did they do that to the young people? God knows the answer. I don't know. Why did they do it? But it's really a generational crime. A generational crime committed on the young generation, their own children. My own generation is the one that's running Eritrea. We are committing crime on our own children. We should never have done that to them. They deserve the same. We were a hopeful generation. We had opportunities. We went to school. We thought we can become something. That's what generated the national liberation movement. We thought we can just be one of the best African countries, the best. There was so much energy. The young generation, how could they be? How could they feel? Because we turned them into our own servants. I wouldn't use the word slave. It's too loaded, the Western concept, slavery and other. And I don't like to use the term in relation to Eritrea because it's a concept that has a lot of loaded meaning to it. But turning them into just instruments of the vision of the first generation that failed, instead of admitting failure, is tragedy. It's tragic. And they never admit it. I think the beginning would be healing, would be to admit and let things hang loose. Let things hang loose. All the crimes that were committed should be spoken. I think we need healing. That's the future, I think. I think the best way we can end this conversation is to say, how do we heal ourselves? And the first generation, who were the fighters, tell to the young people, forgive us. We betrayed you. We mistreated you. We turned you into a generation that has to bear the burden of promise we failed to deliver. And they should ask deep, deep remorse. They should remorse and say, forgive us, we have done bad, and we'll take the punishment from you.
Well, in closing, I'd like to ask, because you do talk about admittance or concession to the crimes that have happened, why aren't more Eritreans acknowledging the problem of life inside Eritrea? Is it because of the association they have with the party, the fear that family members will face retribution by the government, or is it a combination of both? Why is it the case that more Eritreans are not unified in this respect?
It's a deeper problem than that. I'm sorry, but it's a deeper problem than that. In every family, in every husband and wife, brother and sister, family members, one is part of the regime, one is being chased by the regime. In every. So it has penetrated every family member, every community, every religious community deeply, and they are implicated. Nobody is sinner or one is saint. In the same family, there's a saint and there's a sinner in the same, one victim, one victimizer. That's how deep it is. There's one whose brothers have been martyred and feels that, well, there's a reason why my brother, my sister, my 6 people in my family died, and I cannot let it go. And whatever wrong they're doing, even though the government is doing so much wrong, they cannot cross that barrier to say they failed. they say, maybe there's hope. Maybe they can reform. See, what kept people, including myself for a long time, was I thought they can reform. I thought that reform was coming. I really never gave up until 2018. Can you believe me, who lived abroad and writing critically about the government, thought that there might be a chance to reform? Maybe if we write long enough, suggest in different ways, indirectly. People are talking all the time, indirectly to all kinds of people. And even people within the front are also waiting for the reform. It's really hard to explain. Even the president himself speaks in the third person about himself when he's being interviewed and critically saying, this should be reformed, this should be. So this is something bizarre that's going on. And so why? Because even the leader admits how much he has failed and people are ready to forgive him. So to make it clear, I think in my opinion, because we act like a family. Nation is a family, and we think of the nation still as a family, and therefore we're protective of our family. The family is also the one who's abusing us, abusing the young. So that is very deep, very hurtful, because many of our family members died. Many of our families are in the prison. Many of our family members are part of the power structure. Many of our families are the ones that are being, their children being abused in the forefront. So it's a family affair. And when it's family affair, it's hard to, the most brutal relationships and the most brutal killings happen within families. Nothing is as bad as when there's family feud. And family feud is deep, and we can't put the family together. I think we need to really look inside, not outside. Look inside and say, question number one, how do we create stable families in Eritrea? Husband, wife, children, living without anybody telling them what to do. That will be the beginning of restructuring society. Start with a family and create a stable family. Everybody wants stability. I think people will feel, so the government should just let go. Let go of the society, because it has failed society so badly. The state is against the society right now. And so it needs to withdraw, to keep its hands off the people, choking them now. And the more it removes its hands, I think the people can create stable home for the remaining. There are many parishes. And then we need to talk about forgiveness. But then you have to admit you have done something. And so we need redemption, but to do redemption, we have to admit our sins. I'm not talking in terms of Christian or Islam terms, I'm talking about crimes. Other words of sin is crime, the crimes that have been committed towards the whole generation. The whole generation, I feel sorry for them. I really genuinely feel sorry for them, for you guys, your generation, because I really grew up so, I have so much, I'm fond of Asmara and Eritrea and my childhood, and I just wish we could, I can't even tell anyone how wonderful it was. Can't, because they wouldn't believe it, because what they have seen is almost hell. They've been chased. You see, when you go to Eritrea, you see young people running away from the police coming chasing them, because this is a night when they are going house to house to find people who run away from national service, or they should be going to national service.
Gifa. The Gifa.
The Gifa. Mm-hmm. How, this is what the end of politics in Eritrea have become. Cat and mouse chase between the older generation and the young generation. And it's an end. I just want to say that. It's an end. There's no vision beyond it. There's a pleasure that comes out with you when you're powerful over somebody. That's, and people enjoy being powerful over others. There's some, what do you call it, perverted satisfaction people get. It's really perversion. When you can tell somebody, get up at 5 o'clock, you have to line up, carry 50 rocks on your back. If you're not, you're going to be punished. and then you're going to be sent to prison. All that is some perverted power. And when you have individual power over another individual, and there's no mechanism to control it, no rules, no laws, no norms that are institutionalized. That's what's lacking. So we're at a whim of individuals who have personal power, and it's full of personal powers. A lot of people hierarchically organized within the PFDJ. It's hierarchically organized, and each one of them has personal power and personal fiefdom. So it's a rotten system. But to begin to heal it, I think we need to admit a mistake has been done. Not a mistake. Crimes are being done. I think the UN Commission was on the right track. There's no doubt in my mind. They did a tremendous work under very difficult circumstances. The way they discredited them is that you don't have evidence from Eritrea, within Eritrea. You see, they put them in a bind. You can't have evidence in Eritrea without letting them in. And if you let them in, then they will have evidence. But because they don't have the evidence, then they say your data is fake or not to be trusted. So this is the bind Eritrea puts every organization, every circumstance. This bind, spying, puts people in bind against one another. This is an end in itself. This is why it has to end. And with admission, I think we can start.
Dr. Woldemikael, I want to give you the final word.
Final word. What I want to say is this generation of Eritrean youth have borne a burden of responsibility beyond their capacity to deal with. No young people that I know ever carried the burden of a society as this young generation. And that the fact that they, at some point, decided to leave the country, move to another country, to other places, so that they can breathe, so that they can live, so that they can create life for themselves, was the right decision, in my opinion. As long as there is a rotten government in Eritrea, Eritreans should leave the country. I am fine with that, not because I'm happy with that, but because I know of circumstances. In 1974, was it in 1974, 73? In Ethiopia, 1984, in Wallo, there was famine. In Tigray, there was famine. People didn't move. They died in millions and thousands. If they moved, they would have survived towards Sudan, towards Kenya, and the Eritreans moving to other places, they're telling their stories. Some of them are thriving. Many of them perished. But it's better than to die at home and nobody knows about it. So I think the movement abroad is a bright light. There's a lot of suffering, and a lot of them are really participating in the United States, for example. There are some who are in Congress, which is a great thing. Some are running for election. In mayor, I heard somebody was going to run for a mayor. These are great things. And they are always going to be influenced on Eritrea because there's an interaction between diaspora and home, and they can transform the system. So the diaspora have a lot to play, but they have to be active in the places they are in. I don't really think a lot of people who are diaspora, especially my generation, understand that the countries they live in are democratic, that they can learn from them. They spend their time in coffee shops talking about all kinds of nonsense, but not democracy. Don't spend the time to learn from the Swedish democracy, from the German democracy, from the British democracy, from the American democracy. How do they do it? And you don't get it without participating in the system. They need to volunteer their time in Democratic Party or Republican Party in the United States and learn how the Americans do it. There's no magic to democracy. You can learn it. But it doesn't happen by conceptual only, or sitting in Starbucks, or talking to your friends who are like you, Eritreans. No, talk to others. Learn from Americans. They know how to do it. Work with them. They'll show you. Then you can bring it to Eritrea without participating in European political democracy or Sweden or this, creating all kinds of fancy democratic statements and manifestos. It's like the EPLF, ALF manifestos of the 1987, 77. They had programs and then the charter. All that is beautiful language. They never knew what democracy meant, all those people. So I forgive them because they really didn't know what they were talking about. But those of us who are here, they have a chance to know it. And there's no magic, nothing magical except participation. It's through participation you learn. So my mission, my statement to all Eritreans abroad is, wherever you are, especially those who are in democratic countries, learn their democracy, take lessons, attend the classes. They give you, America really, if you're interested, they give you lessons. They give you. There are, what they call them, Women League of Voters. They give lessons about liberty, democracy, how the system works, how to vote, how it works. And you can see Americans are they organize themselves very quickly. You don't need manifestos. You don't need everybody to sign up to the thought. It's just a few people get together. Things happen quickly. Set up committee, you establish, you write reports, make it happen, and then done. And then a new idea comes up. We know the system. I worked there for 40 years. I'm not talking empty-headed. I spent time learning the system. I worked within it and succeeded in it, actually. So I think there's a lot to be learned. And don't always insult them. Oh, these people, what are you talking about? Do you know? Every 4 years in America, power is transferred from one to another. The most powerful country transfers power peacefully. These are revolutions. It's unimaginable how fun, easy, fanfare, celebration, when they do that, it's a skill to make it look like fun. It's really serious. It's a transfer of power. I've never seen anyone give power so easily. But you make it look like it's so easy. And so one generation goes, another party comes and runs it. It's change of government. It's transfer of power. That is success. We can learn something from that instead of arresting everyone who disagrees with us, making them to political deviants.
Dr. Woldemikael, do you want to have any other words?
No, I'm done. Thank you for this.
All right. Thank you so much.
I hope it's useful. I gave you my honest opinion. I hope there's something good can come out from it. Thank you for the chance.
Thank you for appearing on the platform.
You're welcome.